When the ballroom doors opened, no one expected that the man standing alone in the corner, dismissed by the entire room, pushed to the margins like forgotten furniture, would be the only one to pass the most brutal test of all: an elite dinner party, a secret plan, and a devastating truth. Sometimes, the people you think you're judging are the ones being judged. Follow this story to the very end. Hit like and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled. Now, let's begin. The ballroom smelled like money and lies. Ethan Walker stood near the coat check, watching the glittering crowd mill through the grand entrance like a parade of mannequins dressed in silk and arrogance. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung overhead, dripping crystal and cold light. The marble floors gleamed so brightly he could see his own reflection staring back at him, slightly out of place in a rented tux that fit well enough but didn't quite erase the fact that he didn't belong here. He shouldn't have come. That thought had been circling his mind since the invitation arrived 2 weeks ago, a heavy cardstock envelope with his name written in gold calligraphy, no return address. Victoria Langford requests the pleasure of your company. He'd almost thrown it away. Victoria Langford was a name that carried weight in circles he didn't run in. Philanthropist, socialite, patron of the arts and collector of people she deemed worthy. Ethan had met her exactly once, at a fundraiser he'd been dragged to by a client who owed him a favor. She'd shaken his hand, smiled with her mouth but not her eyes, and moved on without a second glance. So why the invitation? You actually came. Ethan turned. A woman in a sleek black dress stood a few feet away, champagne flute in hand, her expression caught between amusement and disbelief. He didn't recognize her, but she clearly recognized him. I did, he said evenly. Brave. She tilted her head, studying him like he was a curiosity in a museum. Or foolish. Haven't decided yet. Why would coming to a dinner party be foolish? She laughed, a sharp sound that didn't reach her eyes. You really don't know, do you? Know what? But she was already walking away, heels clicking against the marble, her laughter trailing behind her like smoke. Ethan exhaled slowly. This was a mistake. He could still leave. No one would notice. He could slip out the side exit, call a cab, and be back in his apartment within the hour, back to the quiet solitude he'd grown comfortable with over the past year. Back to work. Back to normal. But something kept him rooted in place. Pride, maybe. Or stubbornness. Or the nagging sense that if he left now, he'd be proving something. To Victoria. To that woman in the black dress. To every person in this room who looked at him like he was a stain on their expensive rug. So he stayed. The ballroom filled quickly. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that probably cost more than his rent. They moved in clusters, gravitating toward one another with the ease of people who'd known each other for years, maybe generations. Old money. New money pretending to be old. Everyone here had a pedigree, a name that opened doors, a network that stretched across industries and continents. Ethan had none of that. He'd built his company from scratch, a small consulting firm that helped mid-sized businesses streamline their operations. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sexy, but it worked. He'd carved out a modest success, enough to keep the lights on and pay his 3 employees a decent wage. Enough to feel like he was doing something that mattered, even if no one outside his immediate circle had ever heard of him. And now he was here, surrounded by people who probably thought consulting was something you did when you couldn't hack it in finance or law. Mr. Walker, he turned. A server stood beside him, holding a tray of champagne glasses. Thank you. Ethan took one, more for something to do with his hands than because he wanted it. The server nodded and moved on. Ethan sipped the champagne. It was good, better than anything he'd ever tasted. Probably cost more per bottle than he made in a week. You look lost. This time the voice came from a man. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive watch. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't invite warmth. Just taking it all in, Ethan said. First time at one of Victoria's events? Yeah. She throws a good party, the man said. If you survive it. Ethan frowned. Survive? The man chuckled, low and knowing. You'll see. And then he was gone, absorbed back into the crowd. Ethan was starting to feel like he'd walked into the wrong movie. Everyone around him seemed to be speaking in code, throwing out cryptic warnings and half smiles that suggested they knew something he didn't. It set his nerves on edge, a prickle of unease that started at the base of his skull and worked its way down his spine. He scanned the room, looking for someone, anyone he recognized. But every face was unfamiliar, every conversation a closed circle he wasn't invited to join. And then he saw her. Victoria Langford stood at the far end of the ballroom, near a set of French doors that opened onto a terrace. She was holding court, surrounded by a half-dozen people who hung on her every word. She was older than Ethan remembered, late 50s, maybe early 60s, but age had only sharpened her edges. Her silver hair was pulled back into a tight chignon, her dress a deep emerald green that set off the pearls at her throat. She looked like royalty, like someone who'd been born knowing she was better than everyone else and had spent her entire life proving it. As if sensing his gaze, she looked up. Their eyes met across the room. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Ladies and gentlemen," the room fell silent. Victoria's voice carried effortlessly, rich and commanding. She didn't need a microphone. She didn't need to raise her voice. When Victoria Langford spoke, people listened. "Thank you all for joining me tonight," she said, her smile widening. "I know you're wondering why you're here, some of you anyway." A ripple of polite laughter. "Tonight is a celebration," Victoria continued, "of success, of ambition, of the people in this room who have built empires, shaped industries, and left their mark on the world." More applause. Ethan didn't clap. He was too busy watching Victoria, trying to read the subtext beneath her words. "But tonight is also a reminder," she said, her tone shifting, just slightly, "that success is fragile, that reputations can be built and destroyed in a single evening." The room went very still. Victoria's gaze swept across the crowd, pausing briefly on Ethan before moving on. "So let's make tonight memorable, shall we?" The applause returned louder this time, but Ethan didn't join in. His stomach had tightened into a knot. Something was wrong. He could feel it, the way you feel a storm coming before the first drop of rain. Dinner was announced. The crowd began to move toward the dining hall, a cavernous room dominated by a long table set for 30. Crystal glasses, china plates, silverware that gleamed under the chandelier light. Ethan followed the flow, unsure where to sit. There were no place cards, no assigned seats. People claimed their spots with the confidence of those who knew their place in the hierarchy. Ethan hesitated, waiting for an opening. Looking for somewhere to sit? He turned. A young woman stood beside him, maybe 30, with sharp features and sharper eyes. She wore a burgundy dress and an expression that suggested she found the whole evening amusing. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Good luck with that." She walked past him, taking a seat near the head of the table, beside an older man who greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. Ethan stood there, suddenly aware that every seat was filling up. He spotted an empty chair near the middle of the table and moved toward it, but before he could sit down, a woman in a gold dress slid into it without even glancing at him. He tried again. Another empty seat, this one closer to the end. But as he approached, a man stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Sorry," the man said, not sounding sorry at all. "This one's taken." Ethan backed off. He wasn't going to fight over a chair, not here, not in front of these people. He moved down the table, searching for an opening, but every time he got close, someone else claimed the seat. It wasn't overt. No one said anything. They just moved faster, sat down smoother, closed ranks without a word. And then he realized they were freezing him out. He looked around the table. Every seat was full except for a small side table near the back of the room, far from the main gathering. It was barely visible from where Victoria sat at the head of the table, tucked away like an afterthought. That was where they expected him to sit. Ethan's jaw tightened. He could feel eyes on him now, watching to see what he'd do, waiting to see if he'd take the hint. He walked to the side table, sat down. The room exhaled. Conversation resumed, laughter bubbling up from the main table like nothing had happened. Ethan poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher in front of him. His hands were steady, but his pulse was hammering in his ears. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. Victoria wanted him here, in this spot, isolated, visible enough to be seen, but far enough away to be insignificant. The question was why. "Enjoying the view?" Ethan looked up. A server stood beside him, setting down a plate of food. The man's expression was neutral, professional, but there was something in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or pity. "It's fine," Ethan said. The server nodded and moved on. Ethan stared down at his plate. Roasted duck, glazed vegetables, some kind of sauce that probably had a French name he couldn't pronounce. It looked expensive. It looked perfect. He didn't touch it. From the main table, Victoria's voice rose above the din. I'd like to propose a toast. The room quieted again. Glasses were raised. To the people in this room, Victoria said, her gaze sweeping across the table. The ones who understand what it takes to succeed. The ones who know that ambition without refinement is just noise. A few people chuckled. Ethan didn't. And to those who are still learning, Victoria added, her eyes landing on him for just a moment, may they find their place. The room erupted in applause. Glasses clinked. Ethan sat perfectly still, his water glass untouched. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about networking. This was a test. And he was failing. Dinner dragged on, course after course, each more elaborate than the last. The conversation at the main table flowed easily, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the occasional dramatic pause as someone delivered a particularly cutting remark. Ethan caught fragments of it, talk of mergers, acquisitions, vacations in the Hamptons, children at Ivy League schools, the currency of their world. No one looked his way. No one acknowledged the side table. It was like he didn't exist. At one point, a woman from the main table glanced over her shoulder, her gaze landing on Ethan for half a second before she turned back to her companion and whispered something behind her hand. They both laughed. Ethan's grip on his fork tightened. He could leave. He should leave. There was no reason to sit here and endure this, but something stubborn and angry kept him in his seat. If they wanted him to feel small, to slink away with his tail between his legs, they were going to be disappointed. He stayed. Dessert was served, some kind of mousse topped with gold flakes. Ethan didn't eat it. He just sat there, watching the room, watching Victoria hold court at the head of the table like a queen surveying her kingdom. And then, just as the servers began clearing plates, Victoria stood. The room fell silent. I hope you've all enjoyed the meal, she said, her voice smooth as silk. But before we move on to the evening's entertainment, I thought it might be fun to hear from some of our guests. A murmur of interest rippled through the crowd. Ethan Walker, Victoria said, turning her gaze directly on him. Why don't you start? The room turned to look at him. Ethan's pulse spiked. He hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for it. Me? He said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Yes, you. Victoria's smile widened. Tell us about your work. I'm sure everyone here would love to hear about consulting. The way she said it, consulting, made it sound like a dirty word. A few people at the main table exchanged glances. Someone stifled a laugh. Ethan stood slowly. He could feel every eye in the room on him, waiting to see if he'd stumble, if he'd crack under the pressure. He didn't. I help businesses improve their operations, he said simply. Find inefficiencies, streamline processes, make them more profitable. How noble, Victoria said, her tone dripping with condescension. And how long have you been doing this? 5 years. 5 years. She nodded, as if considering. And how many employees do you have? 3. A pause. Then Victoria laughed, a light tinkling sound that somehow managed to be cruel. 3, she repeated. Well, we all have to start somewhere, don't we? The room laughed with her. Not everyone, but enough. Ethan didn't flinch. He just stood there, letting the laughter wash over him, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. Thank you, Ethan, Victoria said, waving him off like a servant. You can sit down now. He sat. The conversation moved on. Someone else was called on to speak. A man who ran a hedge fund, who talked about his latest acquisition in tones that suggested he was doing the world a favor. The room hung on his every word. Ethan tuned it out. His mind was racing now, piecing together the evening in sharp, jagged fragments. The cryptic warnings, the isolation, the public humiliation. This wasn't random. Victoria had orchestrated every moment, every slight, every pointed remark. But why? What did she gain from tearing him down in front of these people? He didn't have an answer, not yet. But he was starting to realize that leaving wasn't an option anymore. Because if he left now, Victoria won. And Ethan Walker didn't lose. The evening wore on. After dinner, the guests moved back into the ballroom for drinks and mingling. Ethan stayed at his side table for a while, watching the crowd reform into their familiar clusters, conversations picking up where they'd left off. No one approached him, no one even glanced his way. It was like he'd become invisible. Finally, he stood. His legs were stiff from sitting so long, his back aching from holding himself upright. He moved toward the edge of the ballroom, near the terrace doors, where the air was cooler and the noise less oppressive. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and let himself breathe. "Still here?" Ethan turned. It was the woman in the black dress from earlier, the one who'd warned him. "Still here," he confirmed. She tilted her head, studying him. "I'm impressed. Most people would have left by now." "I'm not most people." "Clearly." She sipped her champagne, her expression unreadable. "So what's your plan? Just stand here all night and take it?" "Something like that." "That's not a plan. That's masochism." Ethan almost smiled. "Maybe." She shook her head, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Respect, maybe, or pity. "Good luck," she said, and walked away. Ethan watched her go, then turned his gaze back to the ballroom. Victoria was holding court again, surrounded by admirers. She caught his eye across the room and raised her glass in a mock toast. Ethan didn't raise his. He just stared back, his expression unreadable. And Victoria's smile faltered just for a second. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The night stretched on. Ethan stayed near the terrace doors, a silent sentinel on the edge of the party. People came and went, their laughter rising and falling like waves. No one spoke to him. No one acknowledged him. But he didn't leave. And slowly, imperceptibly, the room began to notice. At first it was just a glance here and there, a raised eyebrow, a whispered comment. Why was he still here? Why hadn't he left? Then the whispers grew louder. Who is that guy? The one Victoria called out earlier. He's still here? Why? Ethan heard it all, and he said nothing. He just stood there, arms crossed, expression calm, as if he had every right to be in this room, because he did. And by the time the clock struck 11, the ballroom had shifted. The laughter was quieter now. The conversations less certain. People kept glancing toward Ethan, as if trying to figure out what his presence meant. Victoria noticed too. She was no longer smiling. And then, just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the ballroom doors opened. Everyone turned. A woman stepped inside. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a tailored white suit that stood out against the sea of dark colors. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, her expression composed, unreadable. She moved with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't demand attention. It commanded it. The room fell silent. Ethan didn't recognize her, but everyone else clearly did. The woman's gaze swept across the ballroom, taking in the crowd with cool detachment. And then, without hesitation, she walked forward, straight toward Ethan. The room held its breath. She stopped in front of him, her dark eyes locking onto his. "Mr. Walker," she said, her voice low and steady. Ethan straightened. "Yes?" She extended her hand. "My name is Cassandra Vale," she said, "and we need to talk." Ethan took her hand. Her grip was firm, professional, but there was something else beneath it, a current of energy that made his pulse quicken. Up close, Cassandra Vale was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to see straight through him, and a presence that filled the space around her like gravity. "Talk about what?" Ethan asked, keeping his voice level despite the fact that every person in the ballroom was staring at them. "Not here," Cassandra said. She released his hand and glanced around the room, her expression unreadable. "Too many ears." Before Ethan could respond, Victoria's voice cut through the silence. "Cassandra." The name came out smooth, controlled, but there was an edge beneath it. What a pleasant surprise. Cassandra turned, her gaze settling on Victoria with the kind of calm that suggested she'd been expecting this. "Victoria, thank you for the invitation." Victoria's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us tonight." "I wasn't planning to," Cassandra said, "but circumstances changed." The two women stared at each other across the ballroom, and the air between them crackled with tension. Ethan had the distinct impression he was watching a chess match where he didn't know the rules or even what pieces were on the board. "Well," Victoria said finally, her smile stretching wider, You're always welcome at my events. Though I must say, I'm curious what brings you here now, of all times. I'm sure you are, Cassandra replied, her tone giving nothing away. Another pause. Then Victoria laughed, that same light, cruel sound from earlier. Please, join us, she said, gesturing toward the main gathering. We were just about to move into the lounge for after-dinner drinks. Actually, Cassandra said, I'd like a word with Mr. Walker first, privately. The room went still again. Ethan could feel the weight of every gaze, the unspoken questions hanging in the air like smoke. Victoria's smile tightened. Of course, though I'm not sure what business you could possibly have with him. That's between Mr. Walker and myself, Cassandra said, her voice pleasant but immovable. For a moment, Victoria looked like she might push back. But then she inclined her head, the picture of gracious hostess. Of course. Take all the time you need. Cassandra turned back to Ethan. Shall we? She didn't wait for an answer. She simply walked toward the terrace doors, and Ethan followed, acutely aware of the eyes tracking his every step. They stepped outside into the cool night air. The terrace overlooked a sprawling garden, lit by soft lanterns that cast golden pools of light across the manicured lawn. The noise from the ballroom faded to a muffled hum, and for the first time all evening, Ethan could breathe without feeling like someone was watching him. Cassandra walked to the stone balustrade and leaned against it, her gaze on the garden below. Ethan stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, waiting. Do you know why you're here tonight? She asked without looking at him. I was starting to wonder that myself, Ethan said. Victoria invited you for a reason, Cassandra said. And it wasn't because she values your company. I'd figured that much out. Cassandra turned to face him, her expression serious. She wanted to see how you'd react to the isolation, the humiliation, the public dismissal. She wanted to see if you'd break. Ethan frowned. Why would she care? Because I asked her to. The words landed like a punch. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. What? Cassandra met his gaze evenly. I've been watching you, Mr. Walker, for the past 6 months. Your business, your decisions, the way you handle yourself under pressure. I needed to see who you really are when no one's looking, when there's no advantage to gain, no audience to impress. So I asked Victoria to create a situation that would test you. Ethan's jaw tightened. You set this up. I did. Why? Because I invest in people, Cassandra said simply. Not just their businesses, not just their ideas. I invest in character, and character is the one thing you can't fake when the pressure's on. Ethan took a step back, his mind reeling. The entire evening, the isolation, the mockery, the side table, Victoria's pointed remarks, it had all been a test. And he'd been the subject, observed and evaluated like a lab rat. You could have just asked me, he said, his voice tight. I could have, Cassandra agreed. But people lie. They tell you what they think you want to hear. They perform. I needed to see you when you weren't performing, when you had every reason to walk away and no reason to stay. And what did you see? Cassandra tilted her head, studying him. Someone who doesn't break. Someone who'd rather endure humiliation than give these people the satisfaction of proving them right. That's not strength, Ethan said. That's stubbornness. Sometimes they're the same thing. Ethan looked away, out toward the garden. His hands were shaking, and he shoved them deeper into his pockets. The anger was building now, hot and sharp in his chest. He'd been played, manipulated, used. You had no right, he said quietly. I didn't, Cassandra admitted. But I did it anyway. Why me? Because your name kept coming up, she said. When I asked people in your industry who they trusted, who they respected, your name appeared more than anyone else's. Not the loudest voice, not the biggest company, just the one people said they'd want in their corner when things got difficult. Ethan turned back to her. So you decided to torture me for an evening to confirm it? I decided to see if the reputation matched the reality. And does it? Cassandra's expression softened, just slightly. You're still here, aren't you? Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't, because she was right. He was still here. He'd stayed when every instinct had told him to leave, when every rational part of his brain had screamed that this wasn't worth it, and he still didn't entirely understand why. What happens now? He he asked finally. Now, Cassandra said, we go back inside, and I tell that room exactly what I think of them. Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Cassandra was already walking back toward the ballroom doors. He followed, his heart pounding. They stepped inside. The conversation died instantly. Every face turned toward them, expectant, curious, hungry for whatever drama was about to unfold. Victoria stood near the center of the room, champagne glass in hand, her smile firmly in place. Finished already? She asked lightly. Not quite, Cassandra said. She moved to the center of the ballroom, commanding the space with nothing more than her presence. I'd like everyone's attention, please. The room was already silent, but somehow it got quieter. I'm sure most of you know who I am, Cassandra began. For those who don't, my name is Cassandra Vale. I run Vale Capital. We specialize in long-term investments in emerging companies with strong leadership and sustainable growth potential. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan saw recognition dawn on several faces. Vale Capital was a major player, the kind of firm that could make or break a company with a single decision. For the past year, Cassandra continued, I've been evaluating potential investments, not just balance sheets and projections, but the people behind them. Because in my experience, a brilliant idea means nothing if the person executing it lacks integrity. She paused, letting the words settle. 6 months ago, I identified a company I believed had potential. Small, but well-run. Led by someone who seemed to understand that success isn't just about profit, it's about how you treat people when no one's watching. Ethan's stomach dropped. She was talking about him. But I needed to be sure, Cassandra said. So I designed a test. I asked Victoria to host this event and to invite this individual. And I asked her to make the evening as uncomfortable as possible. Victoria's smile faltered, just slightly. The goal was simple, Cassandra went on. See how this person reacted when faced with exclusion, mockery, and public humiliation. Would they leave? Would they fight back? Would they try to win over the room? Or would they simply endure? She turned, her gaze sweeping across the ballroom. And tonight, I got my answer. The room held its breath. But I also got something I wasn't expecting, Cassandra said, her voice hardening. I got to see how every single person in this room reacted when someone they deemed beneath them walked through those doors. The temperature in the ballroom seemed to drop. I watched you, Cassandra said, her gaze moving from face to face. I watched you close ranks. I watched you freeze him out without a word, without a second thought. I watched you laugh when Victoria mocked his work, when she reduced his accomplishments to a punchline for your entertainment. Though a few people shifted uncomfortably, no one met her eyes. And not one of you, Cassandra continued, her voice cutting, not a single person in this room thought to ask why. You just followed Victoria's lead because it was easier than thinking for yourselves. Victoria's face had gone pale. Cassandra, I'm not finished, Cassandra said, and the sheer force of her tone made Victoria's mouth snap shut. I came here tonight to evaluate one person, Cassandra said, but I ended up evaluating all of you, and you failed. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. You failed, Cassandra repeated, because character isn't about how you treat the people who can help you. It's about how you treat the people who can't. And tonight, when given the choice between basic human decency and social convenience, every single one of you chose convenience. Ethan stood frozen near the terrace doors, his heart hammering. He hadn't expected this, hadn't prepared for it. Cassandra wasn't just defending him, she was dismantling the entire room. There's a reason I don't invest in most of you, Cassandra said, her gaze landing on Victoria. It's not because you lack ambition or intelligence. It's because you lack the one thing I value above all else, integrity. Victoria's hand tightened around her champagne glass. You're making a scene. I'm making a point, Cassandra corrected. And the point is this. I came here tonight prepared to offer a significant investment. $50 million to be exact. I was going to announce it at the end of the evening to be distributed among the ventures represented in this room. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. $50 million was serious money, even for this group. But after watching how you conducted yourselves tonight, Cassandra said, I've changed my mind. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious, Cassandra said. That investment is off the table. All of it. The room erupted. Voices overlapped, protests and denials and frantic explanations all tumbling out at once. But Cassandra raised a hand and somehow, impossibly, the room quieted again. "However," she said, "I am still making an investment tonight." Everyone leaned forward, desperate, hopeful. Cassandra turned and looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Walker," she said, "I'd like to discuss the future of your company, privately, tomorrow morning, if you're available." Ethan's throat went dry. Yes, I'm available." "Good." Cassandra's expression softened, just slightly. "I think we'll have a lot to talk about." She turned back to the room, her gaze sweeping across the stunned faces. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," she said. And then she walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble with crisp finality. Ethan stood there paralyzed as the ballroom descended into chaos. People were shouting now, some at Victoria, some at each other. Victoria herself looked like she'd been struck. Her carefully constructed mask had cracked, and beneath it was something raw and furious. Her eyes found Ethan across the room, and the look she gave him could have stripped paint. Ethan didn't wait to see what happened next. He turned and walked out, following Cassandra's path toward the exit. His legs felt unsteady, his mind spinning. He needed air. He needed space. He needed to understand what the hell had just happened. He found Cassandra in the entrance hall, speaking quietly to a driver. She looked up as Ethan approached. "That was—" Ethan started, then stopped. He didn't have words for what that was. "Necessary," Cassandra finished. "They needed to hear it." "You just torched every relationship in that room." "I didn't have relationships with them," Cassandra said. "I had transactions. There's a difference." Ethan shook his head, still trying to process. "Why did you do that? You could have just walked away, made your investment quietly. You didn't have to call them out." "Yes, I did," Cassandra said, "because if I didn't, they'd never learn. They'd go on treating people like you as expendable, as beneath them, and they'd never face consequences for it." "And now?" "Now they know there are consequences," Cassandra said simply. She glanced at her watch. "I have to go, but I meant what I said, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, my office." She pulled a card from her jacket pocket and handed it to him. "Don't be late." Ethan took the card, his fingers numb. "I won't." Cassandra studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You did well tonight, Mr. Walker. Better than you know." And then she was gone, stepping into a waiting car that pulled away into the night. Ethan stood in the entrance hall, alone, the sounds of chaos still drifting from the ballroom. He looked down at the card in his hand. Simple, elegant, just a name, an address, and a phone number. Cassandra Vale. His phone buzzed. A text from his business partner, Marcus. "How's the fancy party?" Ethan almost laughed. How was he supposed to answer that? He typed back, "Interesting. Tell you tomorrow." He pocketed his phone and walked toward the exit. The valet brought his car around, a 10-year-old sedan that looked painfully out of place among the Teslas and BMWs lining the drive. Ethan didn't care. He got in, started the engine, and drove. He didn't go home. Not yet. He wasn't ready to be alone with his thoughts. Instead, he drove aimlessly through the city, letting the lights and the late-night traffic wash over him. His mind kept circling back to the ballroom, to Victoria's face when Cassandra had pulled the investment, to the way the room had turned on him without hesitation, and the way Cassandra had torn them apart with nothing but words. She'd defended him, not because she knew him, not because they were friends, but because he'd passed some invisible test he hadn't even known he was taking, and now his entire life might be about to change, if he didn't screw it up. He drove for another hour before finally heading home. His apartment was small, a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be trendy but hadn't quite made it yet. The rent was reasonable, the neighbors were quiet, and it was close enough to his office that he could walk on good days. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The space was sparse, minimal furniture, no decorations, nothing that screamed personality. He'd been meaning to make it feel more like home, but work always got in the way. He dropped his keys on the counter and loosened his tie. The adrenaline from the evening was finally wearing off, leaving him exhausted and wired at the same time. He poured himself a drink, cheap whiskey from a bottle he'd had for 6 months, and sat down on the couch. The silence of the apartment pressed in around him. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. He had no idea what Cassandra wanted to discuss. An investment, obviously. But how much? And what would she want in return? Equity? Control? A seat on the board? And more importantly, did he even want it? His company was small, but it was his. He'd built it from nothing, survived the early years when he wasn't sure he'd make rent, and slowly grown it into something stable. He liked the control. He liked knowing that every decision, every success, every failure was his. Bringing in outside money changed that, but it also opened doors. Bigger clients, better resources, the ability to hire more people, take on projects he'd had to turn down before. It was a trade-off, and he had until 10 o'clock tomorrow to decide if it was one he was willing to make. He finished the drink and set the glass down. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. "You alive?" Ethan smiled despite himself. Marcus had been with him since the beginning, back when the company was just the two of them working out of a shared office space that smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. He was more than a business partner. He was a friend. Ethan typed back, "Alive. Barely. Talk tomorrow." He set the phone down and leaned back against the couch, closing his eyes. The image of Cassandra's face floated behind his eyelids. The way she'd looked at him, like she was seeing something he didn't even see in himself. "Someone who doesn't break," she'd said. Ethan wasn't sure that was true. He felt pretty close to breaking most days, but he'd learned a long time ago that you didn't survive by being the strongest or the smartest. You survived by refusing to quit, even when quitting made more sense. Especially when quitting made more sense. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling. 10 o'clock. He'd be there. Ethan didn't sleep well. His mind wouldn't shut down, replaying the evening on an endless loop. Victoria's mocking smile. The empty seat at the side table. Cassandra's sudden appearance. The way the ballroom had erupted when she'd pulled the investment. By the time his alarm went off at 7, he'd already been awake for 2 hours. He showered, shaved, and put on his best suit. Not the rented tux from last night, but a charcoal gray he'd bought for client meetings. It fit well enough. Professional. Serious. He made coffee, burned toast, and gave up on breakfast entirely. At 8:30, he texted Marcus, "Need to push our meeting." Something came up. Marcus replied immediately. "Everything okay?" "Yeah. Tell you later." Ethan grabbed his keys and headed out. Cassandra's office was downtown, in one of the newer high-rises that gleamed like glass towers against the morning sky. He found parking in a garage that charged $20 for the first hour and took the elevator up to the 32nd floor. The reception area was sleek, minimalist, all clean lines and muted colors. A young woman behind the desk looked up as he approached. "Ethan Walker," he said. "I have a 10 o'clock with Cassandra Vale." The receptionist checked her computer, then smiled. "Of course. She's expecting you. Right this way." She led him down a hallway lined with glass-walled conference rooms, each one empty and pristine. At the end of the hall was a corner office with a view that stretched across the entire city. Cassandra stood by the window, a phone pressed to her ear. She glanced up as Ethan entered, held up one finger, and finished her conversation. "Understood. I'll have the contracts ready by Friday." She ended the call and set the phone down. "Mr. Walker, right on time. You said not to be late, and you listened." She gestured to a pair of chairs near the window. "Please, sit." Ethan sat. Cassandra took the chair across from him, crossing one leg over the other, her expression calm and assessing. "How are you feeling after last night?" she asked. "Confused," Ethan admitted, "and a little angry." "Good. You should be." "I'm not sure how to take that." Cassandra leaned back in her chair. "I put you through something difficult without your consent. That's worth being angry about. But I also saw something in you that confirmed what I'd suspected for months, and that's worth discussing." "Which is?" "That you have the kind of integrity most people only pretend to have," Cassandra said. "And that's rare. Rare enough that I'm willing to bet on it." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Bet how much?" $10 million, Cassandra said without hesitation. "Initial investment, more if the projections hold." The number hit him like a freight train. $10 million. It was more than his company's entire revenue for the past 3 years combined. He stopped, trying to gather his thoughts. That's a lot of money. It is, Cassandra agreed, which is why I need to know you're ready for it. I don't understand. Money changes things, Cassandra said. It changes how people see you, how they treat you, how you see yourself. I've watched good people crumble under the weight of success because they weren't prepared for what came with it. And you think I'm prepared? I think you have a better chance than most, Cassandra said, but I need to hear it from you. Are you ready to scale your business? To hire more people, take on bigger clients, operate at a level you've never operated at before? Ethan hesitated. The honest answer was that he didn't know. He'd been running his company at a sustainable pace, taking on projects he could handle, keeping overhead low. Scaling meant risk. It meant trusting other people. It meant letting go of control. But it also meant growth, impact, the ability to do more than just survive. I think so, he said finally. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. Cassandra smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. Good. If you weren't scared, I'd be worried. She stood and walked to her desk, picking up a folder. I had my team put together a preliminary proposal. Take a look. If you're interested, we'll schedule a follow-up to discuss terms. Ethan took the folder. It was thick, filled with projections, timelines, terms, and conditions written in dense legal language. Take your time, Cassandra said. This isn't a decision to rush. Ethan looked up at her. Why me? Really? There are hundreds of companies you could invest in. Bigger ones, more established. Because most of those companies are run by people who would have left that ballroom last night, Cassandra said. And I don't invest in people who quit when things get uncomfortable. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Cassandra's expression softened. You're going to do well, Mr. Walker. I can see it. But you have to believe it too. She extended her hand. Ethan stood and shook it. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Ethan walked out of Cassandra's office building with the folder tucked under his arm, feeling like gravity had shifted. The city looked the same traffic, same crowds rushing past on their way to wherever, but he felt different. Lighter, maybe. Or heavier, he couldn't tell which. $10 million. The number kept spinning through his head, impossible to grasp. He'd spent the last 5 years counting every dollar, stretching budgets, saying no to projects because he couldn't afford to hire the help he needed. And now someone was offering him enough money to change everything, if he wanted it. He stopped at a coffee shop 2 blocks from his office, ordered something he didn't taste, and sat by the window. The folder sat on the table in front of him, unopened. He stared at it like it might explode. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Where are you? We need to talk about the Henderson account. Ethan typed back. Coffee shop on 5th. Come meet me. 3 dots appeared, then, on my way. Marcus showed up 10 minutes later, looking harried. He was younger than Ethan by 3 years, with the kind of energy that made him bounce when he walked. He slid into the chair across from Ethan and immediately spotted the folder. What's that? Marcus asked. A very interesting morning, Ethan said. That's not an answer. Ethan pushed the folder across the table. Read it. Marcus opened it, his eyes scanning the first page, then the second. His expression shifted from curious to confused to outright shocked. Is this real? Marcus looked up, his voice climbing. 10 million? Ethan, what the hell happened last night? It's complicated. Uncomplicate it. So Ethan told him about the ballroom, the isolation, Victoria's cruelty, and Cassandra's sudden entrance. About the test he hadn't known he was taking and the investment that came out of nowhere. Marcus listened without interrupting, his coffee going cold in his hand. When Ethan finished, Marcus sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. That's insane. Yeah. And she just offered you $10 million because you didn't leave a party? That's the short version. Marcus shook his head, looking down at the folder again. This could change everything. I know. We could hire a real team, take on clients we've been turning away, expand into new markets. Marcus's eyes were bright now, the possibilities stacking up in his mind. Ethan, this is what we've been working toward. Is it? Ethan asked quietly. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I built this company to stay small, to have control, to not answer to anyone. Ethan gestured at the folder. This changes that. Of course it changes it. That's the point. But what if I don't want it to change? Marcus stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're seriously considering turning this down? I'm considering everything, Ethan said, which includes the fact that bringing in outside money means bringing in outside expectations, timelines, pressure. We'd have to deliver results. And if we don't, then we figure it out, Marcus interrupted, like we always do. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Ethan had spent 5 years building something that was his, something he understood, something that worked. And the idea of handing even a piece of that over to someone else, even someone like Cassandra, scared him more than he wanted to admit. But he couldn't say that. Not to Marcus, who'd been pushing for growth since day one, who saw potential where Ethan saw risk. Just let me think about it, Ethan said finally. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded instead. Okay, but don't think too long. Opportunities like this don't wait around. I know. Marcus stood, picking up his coffee. I have to get back. Henderson's been calling all morning, but we'll talk later, yeah? Yeah. Marcus left, and Ethan was alone again with the folder and his thoughts. He opened it this time, forcing himself to read through the proposal. The terms were generous, more generous than he'd expected. Cassandra wanted equity, but not control. She wanted quarterly updates, but she wasn't demanding a seat on the board. She wanted growth, but she wasn't setting impossible targets. It was a good deal. By any objective measure, it was a great deal. So why couldn't he shake the feeling that accepting it meant losing something he couldn't get back? Over the next 3 days, Ethan wrestled with the decision. He read the proposal until he could recite it from memory. He ran projections, talked to Marcus, avoided answering calls from numbers he didn't recognize. On Thursday afternoon, his phone rang. Victoria Langford. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Mr. Walker, Victoria said, her voice clipped. I'd like to meet. Today, if possible. Why? To talk. Privately. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him this was a bad idea. But something in her tone, desperation maybe, made him curious. Where? He asked. Vero, 2:00. Victoria was already waiting when Ethan arrived at the restaurant. She looked different in daylight, older, tired, the polish from the party stripped away. Thank you for coming, she said as he sat down. I'm not sure why I did. Because you're curious, Victoria said, and because part of you wants to understand what happened. I understand perfectly, Ethan said. You humiliated me as a favor to Cassandra. Yes, Victoria said simply. I did, and I knew it was cruel, but I want you to understand why. I'm listening, Victoria took a breath. Cassandra Vale is one of the most powerful investors in this city. When she asks for something, you don't refuse, not if you want to survive in this world. So when she asked me to test you, I said yes. And you didn't think about what it would do to me. I didn't think you'd survive it, Victoria admitted. I thought you'd leave within the first hour, and Cassandra would see you weren't worth her time. But I didn't leave. No, Victoria said. You didn't. And that changed everything. She leaned forward. What Cassandra did, pulling that investment, exposing everyone in that room, it destroyed my reputation, years of relationships, gone in one night. That's not my problem. No, Victoria agreed. But I'm offering you an alternative. I have connections, resources, investors who won't demand as much as Cassandra will, people who will give you the freedom to grow without the pressure. And what do you get out of it? Redemption, Victoria said. If I can help you succeed without Cassandra, I prove I still matter. Ethan studied her. She was desperate, grasping for relevance, but there was something genuine beneath it too, a warning that felt real. Why should I trust you? He asked. You shouldn't, Victoria said. But think about what I'm saying. Cassandra's offer looks good now. But when the pressure comes, when you can't meet her expectations, she'll walk away, and you'll be left with nothing. Ethan stood. I'll think about it. He left before she could respond. That night, Ethan called his old mentor, Rebecca Chen. He told her everything, the party, Cassandra, Victoria's warning, the weight of the decision. Rebecca listened in silence. Then she asked the question that cut through everything else. What do you want, Ethan? Not what's safe, not what makes sense. What do you actually want? Ethan closed his eyes. He wanted to build something that mattered. He wanted to stop playing small. He wanted to prove to himself more than anyone that he was capable of more than just surviving. I want to grow, he said finally. I'm just scared of what it'll cost. Everything worth having costs something, Rebecca said. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Friday came. At 4 o'clock, Cassandra called. I assume you're calling with your decision, she said. Ethan took a breath. I need to ask you something first. Of course. Why me? He asked. Really? Why me, specifically? Cassandra was quiet for a moment. Because you didn't perform. Everyone else in that room was playing a role, but you were just you, uncomfortable, angry, stubborn, real. And that's what I need, someone who won't pretend when things get hard. Ethan closed his eyes. So, Cassandra said, what's your answer? And in that moment, Ethan knew. Yes, he said. The word came out clean and final. Good, Cassandra said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. Monday morning, 10 o'clock. We'll finalize everything. I'll be there. She hung up. Ethan sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him. He'd said yes, he'd taken the leap. And now, for better or worse, everything was about to change. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Ethan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, tying his tie for the third time. His hands kept missing the loop, his fingers clumsy with nerves he couldn't quite shake. This was it. The moment everything changed, or the moment he discovered he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He gave up on the tie, loosened it, and tried again. This time it worked. The drive downtown felt longer than usual, traffic thick with Monday morning commuters who looked as tired as he felt. He parked in the same garage, took the same elevator, walked the same hallway to Cassandra's corner office. But nothing felt the same. Everything had shifted, recalibrated around the simple fact that in a few hours he'd be signing contracts that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of his company, his life. The receptionist greeted him with the same professional smile, but this time she led him to a larger conference room. Cassandra was already there, along with two people Ethan hadn't met before, a man in his mid-40s with sharp eyes and a woman about the same age who radiated the kind of calm competence that came from years of closing deals. Ethan, Cassandra said, standing. This is Michael Chen, my head of legal, and Laura Simmons, chief financial officer. They'll be walking us through the contracts. Ethan shook their hands, trying to read their expressions. Michael's grip was firm, perfunctory. Laura's smile was warmer, but her eyes were already assessing him, measuring something he couldn't quite identify. Shall we? Michael gestured to the conference table. They sat. Michael opened a folder that looked thick enough to be a novel. Laura pulled out her laptop. Cassandra folded her hands on the table and waited. Let's start with the basics, Michael said. Vail Capital is offering an initial investment of $10 million in exchange for 22% equity in Walker Consulting. Ethan's stomach tightened. 22%. He'd known there'd be an equity stake, but seeing the number made it real. He was giving up nearly a quarter of his company. That's higher than I expected, he said. It's proportional to the risk, Laura said, her tone matter-of-fact. $10 million for a company your size is significant capital. The equity stake reflects that. But it also means you retain majority control, Cassandra added. This is your company, Ethan. We're here to support growth, not take over. Michael walked him through the rest of the terms. Disbursement schedule, $3 million up front, the rest distributed over 18 months based on performance milestones, quarterly reviews, annual audits. A clause about what happened if the company failed to meet projections. Ethan's head was spinning by the time they reached page 12. I need to understand something, he said, interrupting Michael mid-sentence. What happens if we don't hit the targets? If we take your money and 6 months in, we're not where you expected us to be. Cassandra leaned forward. Then we have a conversation. We look at what went wrong, why, and whether it's fixable. This isn't a one-strike deal, Ethan. I've been doing this long enough to know that growth isn't linear. There will be setbacks. The question is how you respond to them. And if the setbacks are too big? Then we reassess, Cassandra said. But I didn't invest in you because I think you'll fail. I invested because I believe you won't. Laura pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop, turning it so Ethan could see. These are the projections we're working from. Conservative estimates based on your current trajectory, adjusted for the additional resources you'll have access to. Ethan scanned the numbers: revenue growth, headcount expansion, market penetration. The projections were aggressive but not impossible. If everything went right, if he hired the right people, landed the right clients, executed flawlessly, they could hit these numbers. If. Do you have questions about any of this? Laura asked. Ethan had 100 questions, but the one that mattered most was already answered. This was a good deal. Fair terms, reasonable expectations, and a partner who seemed genuinely invested in his success rather than just looking for a quick return. The question wasn't whether the deal was good. The question was whether he was ready for it. No, he said finally. I think I understand. Michael slid a pen across the table. Then, let's make this official. Ethan picked up the pen. It was heavier than he expected, solid and expensive. He looked down at the signature line, his name printed in neat block letters beneath it. This was the moment, the point of no return. He signed. Michael and Laura added their signatures as witnesses. Cassandra signed last, her handwriting elegant and controlled. Congratulations, she said, extending her hand across the table. We're partners now. Ethan shook it, and the reality crashed over him like a wave. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. The first disbursement will hit your account by Wednesday, Laura said, closing her laptop. After that, we'll set up a regular check-in schedule, monthly calls, quarterly in-person reviews. We'll also assign you a point person from our operations team, Cassandra added. Someone who can help with the logistics of scaling, hiring, systems, infrastructure. You won't be doing this alone. Ethan nodded, trying to absorb it all. His mind was already racing ahead, thinking about what came next. Office space, recruiting, client acquisition, the mountain of work that stood between him and those projections Laura had shown him. One more thing, Cassandra said as they stood to leave. You're going to have people coming at you now. Other investors, competitors, people who want to know how you pulled this off. Don't let them distract you. Stay focused on the work. I will, Ethan said. Cassandra smiled. I know you will. That's why I invested. Ethan walked out of the building feeling like he'd just run a marathon. His legs were shaky, his mind buzzing with adrenaline and caffeine, and the surreal awareness that his company now had $10 million attached to it. He sat in his car for a long moment before starting the engine, just breathing. Then his phone rang. Marcus. Well? Marcus's voice was tight with anticipation. Are we celebrating or commiserating? We're celebrating, Ethan said. It's done. We signed. Marcus let out a whoop so loud Ethan had to pull the phone away from his ear. I knew it! I knew you'd do it! Where are you? We need to… I'm heading to the office, Ethan interrupted. We need to talk. All of us. Sarah and Dev, too. They're both here. Get your ass back and let's do this. Ethan hung up and drove back to the office, his hands steady on the wheel but his mind still spinning. The office felt different when he walked in. Or maybe he felt different. Marcus was standing by the window, practically vibrating with energy. Sarah was at her desk, looking up with cautious optimism. Dev had his headphones around his neck, waiting. So, Marcus said, grinning, how rich are we? We're not rich, Ethan said. We're invested. There's a difference. He pulled out his copy of the contracts and set them on the table. Sarah and Dev gathered around, Marcus already reading over Ethan's shoulder. 22% equity for $10 million, Marcus read aloud. That's actually pretty good. It's a solid deal, Ethan said. But it comes with expectations. We need to triple our revenue within 18 months, double our team, expand into new markets. Sarah let out a low whistle. That's ambitious. That's why we took the money, Marcus said. We can do this. Ethan looked at his team, the 3 people who'd been with him from the beginning, who'd worked long hours for modest pay because they believed in what they were building. They deserved to know what they were getting into. This is going to change everything, he said. The pace, the pressure, the expectations. It's not going to be comfortable. And I need to know you're in, really in, because if we're going to do this, we're doing it together. Sarah spoke first. I'm in. But I want equity. Ethan blinked. What? If we're scaling up, if we're taking on more responsibility, I want skin in the game, Sarah said. Not a lot. Just enough to matter. Dev nodded. Me too. Marcus was grinning. I was going to ask the same thing. Ethan sat down, processing. They were right. If they were going to grow, if he was going to ask them to give everything they had, they deserved to own a piece of what they were building. Okay, he said. Let's figure out what's fair. They spent the next 2 hours hammering out the details. By the time they finished, Ethan had carved out 5% of his own equity to distribute among the three of them. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make them partners in more than just name. All right, Marcus said when they'd finalized everything. Now, can we celebrate? Now we can celebrate, Ethan agreed. They went to a bar 2 blocks away, the kind of place with sticky floors and cheap beer that tasted better than it had any right to. Marcus ordered a round of shots. Sarah raised her glass. To taking risks, she said. To not screwing this up, Dev added. To us, Marcus said. They drank, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt something close to peace. But the peace didn't last long. Tuesday morning, Ethan woke up to 12 missed calls and 23 emails, all from numbers and addresses he didn't recognize. He scrolled through them, his stomach sinking with each one. Investment firms wanting to know if he was open to additional funding. Competitors asking if he was looking to sell. Reporters from industry publications requesting interviews. The word was out. By noon, his inbox was flooded. Marcus was fielding calls every 10 minutes. Sarah had stopped answering the office line entirely. This is insane, Marcus said, hanging up for the 5th time in an hour. How do they even know? Cassandra's name, Ethan said. Vale Capital investing in a small firm like ours. It's news. People want to know how we pulled it off. So what do? We ignore it, Ethan said. Just like Cassandra said. We focus on the work. But ignoring it was harder than he'd expected. Every call felt like an opportunity he might be missing. Every email made him second-guess whether he'd made the right choice. Wednesday afternoon, the money hit his account. $3 million. Ethan stared at the bank statement on his computer screen, the number so large it didn't look real. He'd seen numbers like this before, on spreadsheets, in projections, but never attached to his own account. Holy shit, Marcus said, looking over his shoulder. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. We need to move fast, Marcus said. Start hiring. Find office space. Get the infrastructure in place before we take on new clients. Ethan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. $3 million. It was enough to change everything, and it was also enough to destroy everything if they spent it wrong. Let's start with hiring, he said. We need people we can trust. They spent the rest of the week building a recruitment strategy. Marcus reached out to his network, looking for senior consultants who could handle bigger clients. Sarah started interviewing operations managers. Dev built out the technical infrastructure they'd need to support a larger team. By Friday, they had 3 solid candidates and 2 more in the pipeline. Ethan should have felt excited. This was what growth looked like. Momentum, opportunity, progress. Instead, he felt exhausted. That evening, he got a text from an unknown number. I heard congratulations are in order. Well done, Mr. Walker. V. Victoria. Ethan stared at the message, his jaw tightening. She'd been quiet since their meeting at Vero, and he'd almost forgotten about her warning. But here she was, reminding him that she was still watching. He didn't respond. He just deleted the message and tried to forget it. But the unease lingered. Saturday morning, Ethan met Cassandra for coffee. She'd suggested it casually at the end of their Monday meeting, a check-in to see how the first week had gone. They met at a quiet cafe near her office, the kind of place that served $12 lattes and had chairs that were more art than furniture. So, Cassandra said, stirring her coffee. How does it feel? Terrifying, Ethan admitted. She laughed. Good. If you weren't terrified, I'd be worried. Everyone wants a piece of us now, Ethan said. Investors, competitors, reporters. It's like we went from invisible to overexposed overnight. That's what happens when you take money from Vale Capital, Cassandra said. My name carries weight. It opens doors, but it also puts a target on your back. How do I handle it? You don't, Cassandra said simply. You let your work speak for itself. The people who matter will see what you're building. The rest are just noise. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, considering. Victoria reached out, congratulated me. Cassandra's expression didn't change. I'm sure she did. She tried to warn me about you, Ethan said. Told me you'd walk away the moment things got hard. And do you believe her? I don't know, Ethan said honestly. I want to trust you, but I've spent 5 years building something on my own. Trusting someone else with it, it's not easy. Cassandra set down her cup, her gaze steady. I'm not going to tell you to trust me blindly. Trust is earned, not given. But I will tell you this. I don't invest in people I don't believe in. And I don't walk away when things get difficult. I walk away when people stop trying. And if I stop trying, then you'll deserve it when I leave, Cassandra said. But I don't think you will. You're too stubborn for that. Ethan almost smiled. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, Cassandra said, and it's why we're going to succeed. They talked for another hour about hiring strategies and market positioning and the small details that would make or break the next 6 months. By the time they finished, Ethan felt steadier. Not certain, but steadier. As they stood to leave, Cassandra touched his arm lightly. One more thing. Don't let Victoria get in your head. She's bitter, and bitter people say things to make themselves feel better. You made the right choice. How do you know? Because you're still here, Cassandra said, and you're still working. Ethan walked back to his car, Cassandra's words echoing in his mind. You're still here. You're still working. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The following week moved faster than Ethan could process. They hired their first new employee, a senior consultant named Rachel, who'd spent 10 years at a top-tier firm and was ready for something smaller, more hands-on. Then they brought on 2 junior analysts to support the growing workload. Sarah found office space, a suite in a building 3 blocks from their current location, big enough for 20 people with room to grow. Dev built out the systems they'd need to manage a larger team, integrating new software and databases that made Ethan's head hurt just looking at them. Marcus landed their biggest client yet, a mid-sized manufacturing company that wanted to overhaul their entire supply chain operation. It was exactly the kind of project they'd been turning down for years because they didn't have the bandwidth. Now they did. By the end of the second week, Ethan was working 16-hour days, sleeping in his office more often than his apartment, surviving on coffee and takeout and the sheer momentum of forward motion. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't just surviving. He was building something real. Thursday afternoon, his phone rang, an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Walker? The voice was unfamiliar, male, professional. This is he. Well, my name is Jonathan Price. I represent a consortium of investors who were present at Victoria Langford's event. We'd like to extend an invitation to meet and discuss potential partnership opportunities. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not looking for additional partners right now. I understand, Jonathan said smoothly, but I think you'll find our proposal compelling. We're prepared to offer significantly better terms than what Vail Capital provided. I'm not interested. Mr. Walker, Ethan hung up. His hands were shaking, not from anger, from the realization that this was only the beginning. The vultures were circling, looking for any crack in the foundation they could exploit. He texted Cassandra, getting calls from other investors, declining all of them but wanted you to know. Her response came immediately. Good. Let me know if anyone pushes too hard. Ethan set the phone down and went back to work. That night, he stayed late at the office, reviewing budgets and timelines until his eyes blurred. Around 11, the door opened. Marcus walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Figured you'd still be here, Marcus said, handing one over. Can't sleep anyway, Ethan said. Marcus sat down across from him. You okay? You've been weird all week. Define weird. Quieter than usual, more in your head, like you're waiting for something to go wrong. Ethan took a sip of coffee, considering. Marcus wasn't wrong. He'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop since they signed the contracts, waiting for Cassandra to change her mind, for a client to bail. for something to prove that this was all too good to be true. "I'm fine," he said finally. "You're a terrible liar," Marcus said. "Talk to me." Ethan set down his cup. "What if we can't do this? What if we took Cassandra's money and we fail? We'd lose everything, not just the company, our reputation, everything we've built." "Then we fail," Marcus said simply, "and we figure out what comes next." "That's it? That's your pep talk? What do you want me to say?" Marcus leaned forward. "That we're guaranteed to succeed? That there's no risk?" "You know that's not true. This is a gamble. We're betting on ourselves. And yeah, we might lose, but we might win, and we'll never know unless we try." Ethan looked at him, this friend who'd been by his side since the beginning, who believed in what they were building even when Ethan didn't. "Thanks," he said quietly. "Any time," Marcus said. "Now go home. Get some sleep. We've got a long day tomorrow." Ethan did go home that night, and for the first time in weeks, he actually slept. Friday morning, he woke up to an email from Laura Simmons. Subject line, Q1 review scheduled. He opened it. Cassandra wanted to meet in 3 weeks to review progress, discuss challenges, and align on next steps. 3 weeks. Ethan looked at his calendar, at the mountain of work that stood between now and then, and felt the familiar weight of pressure settling on his shoulders. But this time, it didn't feel crushing. It felt like purpose. He got out of bed, made coffee, and got to work. Because that's what he did. He didn't quit. He didn't break. He just kept moving forward, one step at a time, building something that mattered. And for now, that was enough. The 3 weeks before the quarterly review passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Ethan had always thought he understood what busy meant, but this was something else entirely. This was operating at a velocity that left no room for hesitation, no space for second-guessing. Rachel, the senior consultant they'd hired, turned out to be worth every dollar they were paying her. She took the manufacturing client and ran with it, building out a project plan so detailed it made Ethan's look like napkin sketches. The 2 junior analysts, Kevin and Priya, were sharp and hungry, the kind of people who stayed late not because they had to, but because they wanted to prove themselves. The new office was supposed to be ready by the end of the month, but construction delays pushed it back 2 weeks. In the meantime, they were crammed into their old space like sardines, desks shoved against walls, people working from the hallway when the conference room was full. It should have been miserable. Instead, it felt electric. Sarah managed the chaos with the kind of precision that reminded Ethan why he'd hired her in the first place. She built systems, created workflows, turned the disorder into something functional. Dev worked 18-hour days getting the infrastructure in place, building databases and integrating software that Ethan barely understood but trusted completely. And Marcus was everywhere at once, closing deals, managing clients, keeping the energy high, even when everyone else was running on fumes. Ethan tried to be everywhere too. Client calls in the morning, team meetings in the afternoon, budget reviews at night. He approved hires, signed contracts, made decisions faster than he had time to process them. And through it all, the question that kept circling in the back of his mind, were they moving too fast? 2 weeks in, they hit their first real problem. The manufacturing client, the big one Marcus had landed, wasn't happy. Rachel had presented the initial assessment, and the CEO had pushed back hard. Too aggressive, he'd said, too much change too quickly. He wanted a revised plan by Friday, or he was walking. Rachel came to Ethan's desk that afternoon, her usual confidence shaken. "I might have screwed this up," she said. "Walk me through it," Ethan said. She pulled up the presentation on her laptop. Ethan read through it, his stomach sinking with each slide. The plan was brilliant, comprehensive, data-driven, exactly what the company needed. But it was also exactly what Rachel said. Too much, too fast. "You're not wrong," Ethan said. "This is what they need, but they're not ready to hear it. So what do we do?" "We scale it back," Ethan said. "Phase it. Give them quick wins first, then build toward the bigger changes. That'll take longer, but they'll actually implement it," Ethan said. "A perfect plan they won't follow is useless. A good plan they'll actually use is valuable." Rachel nodded slowly. "I'll rework it." "We'll rework it," Ethan corrected, "together." They spent the next 3 days rebuilding the proposal from the ground up. Ethan had forgotten what it was like to be in the weeds of a project, to actually do the work instead of just managing it. It felt good, grounding. They presented the revised plan on Friday morning. The CEO read through it in silence, his expression unreadable. Ethan could feel Rachel's tension beside him, could sense Marcus watching from the corner of the room. Finally, the CEO looked up. "This is better," he said. "Let's move forward." Rachel exhaled so hard Ethan thought she might pass out. They walked out of the meeting, and Marcus clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Crisis averted. "For now," Ethan said. But he was smiling. That weekend, Ethan forced himself to take a day off. Not because he wanted to, there was too much to do, too many plates spinning, but because Sarah had cornered him in the office Friday afternoon and told him in no uncertain terms that if he didn't rest, he'd burn out before the quarterly review. "You're no good to us exhausted," she'd said. "Take a day, sleep, do something that's not work." So Saturday morning, Ethan slept until 9, made actual breakfast instead of grabbing whatever was quickest, and went for a run. The city was quieter on weekends, the pace slower. He ran along the waterfront, letting his mind empty with each step. By the time he got back to his apartment, he felt almost human again. His phone buzzed, a text from Cassandra. "Hope you're not working today. The review's important, but so is rest." Ethan stared at the message, surprised. He hadn't expected Cassandra to care whether he was working or not. Investors cared about results, not process. He typed back, taking the day off. "Sarah's orders." Her response came quickly. "Smart woman. See you Thursday." Thursday. The quarterly review, 4 days away. Ethan set the phone down and tried not to think about it. Monday brought a new problem. One of their longest-standing clients, a regional logistics company they'd been working with for 3 years, called to say they were putting their contract on hold. Budget cuts, the CFO explained. Nothing personal. They'd reach out when things stabilized. Ethan hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long moment. Marcus walked in. "I heard. How bad is it?" "It's 15% of our current revenue," Ethan said. "Shit!" "Yeah." Marcus sat down. "Do we panic?" "No," Ethan said, though his stomach was churning. "We adjust. We've got new clients coming in. The manufacturing deal alone will replace most of what we're losing." "But not all of it." "Not all of it," Ethan agreed. They spent the rest of the morning running numbers, recalculating projections, figuring out how to absorb the loss without derailing their growth trajectory. By noon, they had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. "We need to tell Cassandra," Marcus said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I know." He drafted an email trying to strike the right balance between transparency and confidence. "We lost a client. Here's our plan to address it. Here's why we're still on track." He read it 3 times before hitting send. Cassandra's response came within the hour. "These things happen. Let's discuss at the review." Short, neutral, impossible to read. Ethan tried to take comfort in the fact that she hadn't sounded alarmed, but the uncertainty gnawed at him anyway. Tuesday, they moved into the new office. The space was bigger than Ethan had expected, with windows that actually let in natural light and enough room that people weren't literally working on top of each other. Sarah had organized the move with military precision, labeled boxes, assigned desks, a timeline that had everything unpacked and functional by end of day. By 6 o'clock, the team was settled. Marcus christened the new conference room by ordering pizza for everyone. They sat around the table, all 8 of them now, counting the new hires, eating cheap pizza, and talking about everything except work. Ethan looked around the table and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a company anymore. It was a team. People who'd bet on him, who'd followed him into this crazy expansion because they believed it could work. He couldn't let them down. "Speech," Marcus said, grinning. "No," Ethan said. "Speech, speech, speech." The chant started, everyone joining in until Ethan had no choice but to stand. "I'm not good at speeches," he said. "We know," Rachel said. "Do it anyway." Ethan took a breath. 3 weeks ago, this was 3 people in a closet pretending to be an office. Now it's 8 people in an actual office pretending to know what we're doing. A few laughs. "We're going to make mistakes," Ethan continued. "Ethan, we're going to have clients walk away, projects that don't work out, days where we question why we're doing this. But we're also going to build something that matters, something we're proud of, and we're going to do it together." He raised his beer. "To not screwing this up." "To not screwing this up," they echoed. They drank, and Ethan felt the weight on his shoulders lighten, just slightly. Wednesday night, Ethan couldn't sleep. Tomorrow was the quarterly review. Tomorrow he'd sit across from Cassandra and her team and present everything they'd accomplished in 3 weeks. The wins, the losses, the pivot they'd had to make when the logistics client walked. He'd prepared. He had slides, data, answers to every question he could anticipate, but preparation didn't stop the anxiety from crawling up his spine at 3 in the morning. He got out of bed, made coffee, and pulled up the presentation one more time, reviewed the numbers, checked for typos, made minor adjustments that probably didn't matter but gave his hands something to do. At 4:30, his phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "You awake?" "Yeah, stop working. You're ready." Ethan smiled despite himself. "How'd you know I was working?" "Because I know you. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we kill it." Ethan set the phone down, closed the laptop, and went back to bed. This time, he actually slept. Thursday morning arrived too fast and too slow at the same time. Ethan dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to sign the contracts. He checked his reflection in the mirror, tie straight, hair presentable, expression calm, even though his pulse was hammering. Marcus met him at the office. They'd decided to present together, a united front. Sarah had offered to come too, but Ethan wanted her managing the team while he was out. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "No," Ethan said. "Good. Me neither." They drove to Cassandra's office in silence, both of them running through the presentation in their heads. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt longer than Ethan remembered. Cassandra was waiting in the same conference room, along with Laura and Michael. No small talk this time, just a professional nod and a gesture to sit. "Let's dive in," Cassandra said. Ethan opened his laptop, pulled up the presentation, and began. He walked them through the numbers first. Revenue was up 18% from where they'd been 3 weeks ago. They'd hired 5 new people, landed 2 major clients, moved into a larger office. Then he showed them the challenges. The logistics client who'd walked, the manufacturing deal that had almost fallen apart, the construction delays that had eaten into their budget. Laura took notes. Michael asked sharp questions about burn rate and hiring costs. Cassandra listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When Ethan finished, the room was quiet. Finally, Cassandra spoke. "You lost a major client and didn't tell us until after it happened." Ethan's stomach dropped. "I sent you an email Monday." "You sent me an email after you'd already developed a mitigation plan," Cassandra corrected. "I want to know about problems when they happen, not after you've solved them. I didn't want to bother you with something we could handle." "Ethan," Cassandra said, and her tone was sharper now. "I'm not here to micromanage, but I am here to partner. That means transparency. If a client walks, I need to know immediately, not because I don't trust you to handle it, but because I might have resources or connections that could help." Ethan nodded, chastened. "Understood." Laura leaned forward. "That said, your mitigation plan was solid. The numbers still work. You're slightly behind on revenue projections, but not enough to be concerning." "Yet," Michael added. "The question is whether this is a one-time setback or the beginning of a pattern." "It's not a pattern," Marcus said, speaking for the first time. "We've got 3 more prospects in the pipeline, 2 of which are ready to close. We'll be back on track by end of quarter." Cassandra studied them both. "I believe you, but I need you to believe something too. This partnership works when we're honest with each other. That means telling me when things go wrong, even if you think you can fix them on your own." "I get it," Ethan said. "I'll do better." "Good." Cassandra's expression softened slightly. "Now, let's talk about what you're doing right, because there's a lot of it." They spent the next hour going through the presentation in detail. Cassandra asked about the team, about Rachel's performance, about how Ethan was managing the increased workload. Laura walked through financial projections for the next quarter. Michael reviewed the legal implications of some of the new contracts they'd signed. By the time they finished, Ethan's head was spinning, but the knot in his stomach had loosened. Cassandra stood, extending her hand. "You've had a solid first few weeks. Keep this momentum, and we'll exceed projections by year end." Ethan shook her hand, relief flooding through him. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Cassandra said. The hard part's still ahead. Ethan and Marcus walked out of the building into the afternoon sunlight, both of them exhaling hard. That was brutal, Marcus said. But we survived, Ethan said. More than survived. She said we're on track. She also said we need to communicate better. Yeah, well, Marcus said. She's not wrong. They got lunch at a diner down the street, both of them too wired to go straight back to the office. They ordered burgers and coffee and sat in silence for a while, just decompressing. You know what the weirdest part is? Marcus said finally. What? I think we're actually going to pull this off. Ethan looked at him. You had doubts? Of course I had doubts, Marcus said. This whole thing is insane, but it's working, and that's terrifying. Why terrifying? Because now we have something to lose, Marcus said. Before, if we failed, we'd just be two guys who tried and didn't make it. Now we've got 8 people depending on us. We've got Cassandra's money. We've got expectations. The stakes are real. Ethan understood. He'd been feeling the same weight for weeks, the responsibility of it all pressing down on his shoulders every morning when he woke up. We'll figure it out, Ethan said, though he wasn't sure if he was trying to convince Marcus or himself. Yeah, Marcus said. We will. They finished lunch and went back to the office. Sarah had questions about the review. Dev needed sign-off on a new system integration. Rachel wanted input on the next phase of the manufacturing project. Ethan dove back in, letting the work consume him. That night, he stayed late again. Not because he had to, but because the office felt safer than his empty apartment. Here, he was building something. Here, he had purpose. Around 9, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I heard the quarterly review went well. Congratulations. You're exceeding everyone's expectations, including mine. V. Victoria. Ethan stared at the message, anger flaring hot in his chest. How did she know about the review? Was she tracking him? Did she have sources inside Vale Capital? He started to type a response, then stopped. Deleted it. This was what she wanted, to get in his head, to make him doubt, to prove she still had influence. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. He deleted the message and went back to work. But the unease lingered. Friday afternoon, Cassandra called. Do you have time for a coffee? She asked. Now? If you're free. Ethan glanced at his calendar. He had a team meeting in an hour, but he could move it. Sure. Where? Same place as last time. They met at the cafe, Cassandra already waiting with 2 cups when Ethan arrived. Vanilla latte, right? She said, pushing one across the table. You remembered. I remember everything, Cassandra said. It's part of the job. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them sipping their coffee. Victoria reached out to you again, Cassandra said. It wasn't a question. Ethan's jaw tightened. How did you know? Because I know Victoria, Cassandra said, and I know she's not going to let this go quietly. She congratulated me on the review. How does she even know about that? She has sources, Cassandra said. People who owe her favors, who tell her things because they think it'll keep them in her good graces. Don't worry about it. Easy for you to say. Cassandra leaned back in her chair, studying him. Victoria's trying to destabilize you, make you question whether you made the right choice, whether I'm trustworthy, whether this whole thing is going to come crashing down. Don't let her. I'm not. Aren't you? Cassandra's gaze was sharp. You hesitated to tell me about the client you lost. You second-guess every decision. You're waiting for something to go wrong because deep down you don't believe you deserve this. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Because she was right. He'd spent 5 years building a company on his own, surviving on stubbornness and refusal to quit. But somewhere along the way, he'd internalized the idea that he wasn't supposed to succeed beyond a certain level. That real success, the kind Cassandra was offering, was for other people. I'm working on it, he said finally. Good, Cassandra said, because I didn't invest in someone who was going to play small. I invested in someone who was going to build something extraordinary. Don't prove me wrong. I won't. I know you won't, Cassandra said. That's why I'm here. They finished their coffee, and Cassandra walked him to the door. One more thing, she said. Stop working 16-hour days. I need you sharp, not burned out. Says the woman who probably works 20-hour days. Cassandra smiled. I've been doing this for 20 years. You've been doing it for 3 weeks. Pace yourself. Ethan drove back to the office, Cassandra's words echoing in his mind. You don't believe you deserve this. She was right, but maybe it was time to start believing. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Not easy, not comfortable, but sustainable. Ethan delegated more, trusting Rachel and Sarah and Dev to handle things he would have micromanaged before. Marcus closed 2 of the 3 prospects they'd been chasing, bringing their revenue projections back in line. The team gelled. Kevin and Priya proved themselves again and again, taking on more responsibility than Ethan had expected. Rachel became his right hand on complex projects, her experience filling gaps he hadn't even known existed. And slowly, carefully, Ethan started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to pull this off. 6 weeks after the quarterly review, Ethan got an email from Laura. Subject line, Q2 disbursement approved. The second tranche of funding was coming through, another $3.5 million. Ethan stared at the email, his heart pounding. They'd hit the milestones. They'd proven themselves. They were doing it. He called Marcus into his office and showed him the email. Marcus read it twice, then looked up with the biggest grin Ethan had ever seen. We did it, Marcus said. We did it, Ethan agreed. And for the first time since this whole thing started, Ethan let himself feel it. Not relief, not just survival, pride. They'd built something real, something that worked, something that was growing, and they were just getting started. The second disbursement hit the account on a Tuesday morning, and with it came a problem Ethan hadn't anticipated: confidence. Not his own. He was still working on that, still fighting the voice in his head that whispered he didn't deserve this. But the team's confidence had shifted. Suddenly, people who'd been cautious were making bolder calls. Rachel was pushing harder in client meetings. Marcus was closing deals faster, sometimes too fast. Even Sarah, usually the voice of caution, was approving expenses Ethan would have questioned 3 months ago. It wasn't reckless, not yet, but it was close enough to make him nervous. Thursday afternoon, he called a team meeting. All 8 of them crammed into the conference room, coffee cups and laptops scattered across the table. We need to talk about something, Ethan said. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Uh-oh. This is your serious voice. I'm always serious. No, you're always worried. This is different. A few people laughed, but the tension in the room was palpable. Ethan took a breath. We just got another $3.5 million. That's incredible. It means we're hitting our targets, doing everything right. But it also means we have more to lose. So what are you saying? Rachel asked. I'm saying we can't get complacent, Ethan said. We can't start thinking the money will just keep coming, that every deal will close, that we're untouchable, because we're not. Nobody thinks we're untouchable, Sarah said. Don't we? Ethan looked around the room. Marcus, you closed the Hoffman deal in 2 weeks. That's half the time we usually take for due diligence. Because they were ready to move, Marcus said, defensive. I didn't cut corners. I'm not saying you did, Ethan said. I'm saying we need to be careful. One bad deal, one client we oversell to, one project we can't deliver on. That's all it takes to derail everything we've built. The room was quiet now. Dev was staring at his laptop. Priya was chewing her lip. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable. So what do you want us to do? Rachel asked finally. Slow down? I want us to be smart, Ethan said. I want us to keep the same standards we had when we were scrapping for every dollar. Just because we have money now doesn't mean we should spend it like it's unlimited. Fair enough, Sarah said. But Ethan, you need to trust us too. We're not idiots. We know what's at stake. Ethan nodded slowly. I know, I'm sorry. You're scared, Marcus finished. We get it, but you can't lead from a place of fear. You taught me that. Ethan almost smiled. Did I? Yeah, 5 years ago, when we were starting out, and I wanted to turn down our first big client because I thought we'd fail. You told me fear was normal, but letting it make decisions for us was suicide. I said that? Word for word. The tension in the room eased just slightly. Okay, Ethan said. Point taken. But let's stay sharp, yeah? All of us. They nodded and the meeting broke up. People drifted back to their desks, conversations resuming. Marcus lingered. You okay? Yeah, Ethan said. Just overthinking. That's your superpower, Marcus said. And your curse. Story of my life. That evening, Ethan stayed late again. The office was quiet, everyone else gone home. He sat at his desk, reviewing budgets, trying to find the balance between growth and sustainability. His phone buzzed. A text from Cassandra. Dinner tomorrow? There's something I want to discuss. Ethan's stomach tightened. Something I want to discuss was never good. It meant a problem, a change, a complication he wasn't prepared for. He typed back, sure, where? She sent an address. A restaurant downtown he'd never heard of, 7 o'clock. Ethan set the phone down and tried not to spiral. Friday dragged. Every hour felt like 3, anticipation and anxiety building in equal measure. By the time 6:30 rolled around, Ethan was exhausted from the weight of wondering what Cassandra wanted to talk about. The restaurant was upscale but not obnoxious, the kind of place where people went to talk business over expensive wine and food that came in portions too small to actually fill you up. Cassandra was already seated when Ethan arrived, a glass of red wine in front of her. You're early, Ethan said, sliding into the chair across from her. Habit, Cassandra said. I like to observe the room before meetings. This is a meeting? Everything's a meeting, Cassandra said. But this one's off the record. Just you and me. A waiter appeared, took Ethan's drink order, whiskey, neat, and disappeared. So, Ethan said, what did you want to discuss? Cassandra took a sip of her wine, considering. Victoria Langford filed a lawsuit against me 3 days ago. Ethan's blood went cold. What? Breach of contract, defamation, emotional distress, Cassandra said, her tone almost bored. It's frivolous. My lawyers will have it dismissed within the month, but I wanted you to hear it from me before it hits the press. Why would it hit the press? Because Victoria's making sure it does, Cassandra said. She's not trying to win the lawsuit. She's trying to damage my reputation. Make investors think twice about working with me. Make people like you question whether you made the right choice. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's smart, Cassandra finished. Ruthless, but smart. She knows she can't win in court, so she's fighting in the court of public opinion. The waiter returned with Ethan's drink. He took a long sip, trying to process. How does this affect me? He asked. It doesn't, Cassandra said. Not directly, but your name will come up. You're the centerpiece of her complaint, the person I favored unfairly, the evidence of my malicious behavior. Reporters will call you. Other investors will ask questions. It's going to be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable, Ethan repeated. That's one word for it. I know, Cassandra said, and I'm sorry. This isn't what you signed up for. No, it's not. They sat in silence for a moment. Ethan could feel the anger building in his chest, not at Cassandra, but at Victoria, at the fact that he'd become a pawn in someone else's vendetta. What do you need from me? He asked finally. Nothing, Cassandra said. My lawyers will handle everything, but if reporters contact you, don't comment. Refer them to Vail Capital's PR team. And if you get calls from other investors trying to poach you, let me know immediately. You think people will try to poach me? I know they will, Cassandra said. You're a success story. Victoria's lawsuit will put a spotlight on you, and every vulture in the city will see an opportunity. I'm not interested. I know you're not, Cassandra said, but they'll be persuasive. They'll offer better terms, fewer restrictions, more money. They'll tell you I'm a liability, that you'd be better off cutting ties before my reputation drags you down. And what do you want me to tell them? Cassandra met his gaze evenly. I want you to tell them the truth. That you and I are partners. That I've been transparent and supportive. That this lawsuit is noise and you're focused on building your company. And if I start to doubt that, then we talk, Cassandra said, like we're talking now. I don't need blind loyalty, Ethan. I need honesty. If this becomes a problem for you, I want to know. Ethan took another sip of his drink, considering. Victoria's warning echoed in his mind. She'll walk away the moment things get hard. But here, Cassandra was, walking toward the problem, not away from it. Okay, he said. I'm with you. Cassandra's expression softened slightly. Good, because this is about to get messy. The lawsuit hit the news Monday morning. Ethan woke up to 17 missed calls and 32 emails, half of them from reporters asking for comment. His phone kept buzzing, notifications piling up faster than he could clear them. He called Marcus. Have you seen the news? Yeah, Marcus said. It's everywhere. Bloomberg, Financial Times, even some of the local outlets. What are they saying? That Cassandra Vale is being sued by a prominent socialite for ruining her reputation. That you're at the center of it. Hold on, let me read this one. Sources close to the situation suggest Walker may have been complicit in orchestrating the events that led to Langford's humiliation. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. That's insane. It's Victoria, Marcus said. She's controlling the narrative, making you look like a schemer who used her party to get ahead. I didn't even want to go to that party. Doesn't matter, Marcus said. Truth doesn't matter when you're playing this game. Perception does. Ethan sat down on his couch, his head in his free hand. What do we do? We follow Cassandra's advice, Marcus said. We don't comment. We don't engage. We let her lawyers handle it. And if clients start asking questions, then we tell them the truth, Marcus said, that we're focused on delivering results, not tabloid drama. Ethan wanted to believe it would be that simple, but he knew better. By noon, 3 clients had called asking for reassurance. 2 potential prospects had pushed back their meetings, citing concerns about instability. And Ethan had received 4 separate offers from investors he'd never heard of, each one promising better terms than Cassandra had given him. He forwarded all of them to Cassandra without responding. Sarah cornered him in his office around 2. We need to address this with the team. People are nervous. What do you want me to say? That we're fine, Sarah said. That this lawsuit doesn't affect our operations. That Cassandra's got it under control. And if I'm not sure that's true? Sarah studied him. Are you having doubts? I'm having questions, Ethan said. There's a difference. Not to the team there isn't, Sarah said. They're watching you. If you look scared, they'll get scared. If you look confident, they'll follow your lead. I'm not confident. Then fake it, Sarah said bluntly. Because right now we need you to be a leader, not a worrier. Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd been with him since the beginning, who'd never pulled punches, who was probably the most honest person in his life besides Marcus. Okay, he said. Get everyone together. Conference room, 3 o'clock. At 3, the team assembled. Ethan could see the tension on their faces. Kevin and Priya looked anxious. Dev was frowning at his laptop. Even Rachel seemed uncertain. I know you've all seen the news, Ethan began, and I know it's concerning. So let's address it head on. He took a breath. Victoria Langford filed a lawsuit against Cassandra Vale. It's baseless. It'll be dismissed, and it has nothing to do with our operations. But it's going to generate noise. Reporters will call. Clients will ask questions. Some of you might even get approached by other investors trying to recruit you away. Has that happened? Kevin asked. To me, yes, Ethan said. I've already turned them down, because here's what you need to understand. Cassandra Vale took a risk on us when nobody else would. She didn't just write a check, she became a partner. And when things get difficult, partners don't run. They stay and they fight. So we're staying with Vale Capital, Rachel said. It wasn't quite a question. We're staying with Vale Capital, Ethan confirmed. Unless someone gives me a reason not to. But right now, all I see is a bitter woman trying to tear down someone who called her out for bad behavior. Marcus spoke up. What do we tell clients? The truth, Ethan said. That we're focused on delivering results. That this lawsuit is a distraction, not a crisis. And that we're more committed than ever to building something that lasts. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Sarah nodded. That works. Good, Ethan said. Now let's get back to work. The team dispersed, energy returning to the office. Ethan sat alone in the conference room for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Walker? The voice was familiar, clipped, feminine. Victoria. I wanted to reach out personally, she said, to apologize for dragging you into this. You're not sorry. You're right, Victoria said. I'm not. But I did want to give you an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To distance yourself from Cassandra before her reputation takes you down with her, Victoria said. I have investors ready to step in. Better terms than what she gave you. No equity stake. Just capital in exchange for a small advisory role. I'm not interested. You should be, Victoria said. This lawsuit is just the beginning. I have years of dirt on Cassandra Vale. Every shady deal, every corner she cut, every person she stepped on to get where she is. By the time I'm done, no one will want to touch her. Then you'll lose, Ethan said. Because the people who matter can see through this. They know you're bitter. They know you're lashing out because you lost something you thought you deserved. And what did I lose? Relevance, Ethan said. Cassandra moved on. The people at that party moved on. The only person still stuck in that ballroom is you. There was a long pause. Then Victoria laughed, sharp, brittle. You have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe not, Ethan said. But I know enough to see that you're not trying to win anything. You're just trying to burn everything down because you can't stand watching other people succeed. Careful, Mr. Walker, Victoria said, her voice ice. You're making an enemy you can't afford. I already have an enemy I can't afford, Ethan said. Her name's Fear, and she's a lot scarier than you. He hung up. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from anger. From the sheer audacity of Victoria calling him, trying to manipulate him, trying to tear down the one person who'd actually believed in him. He texted Cassandra. Victoria just called. Tried to poach me. I told her to go to hell. Her response came immediately. Good. Let me know if she contacts you again. Ethan set the phone down and went back to work. The next 2 weeks were brutal. The lawsuit dominated industry news. Every day brought a new article, a new leak, a new source close to the situation, sharing salacious details about Cassandra's supposed misconduct. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The narrative had taken on a life of its own. 3 more clients called to postpone their contracts. 2 prospects went radio silent. One of Ethan's new hires, a junior analyst named Tom, quit after just a week, citing concerns about the company's stability. Revenue projections for the quarter dropped 15%. Ethan stopped sleeping properly. He'd lie awake at 3 a.m, running numbers in his head, trying to figure out how to salvage what they'd built. He snapped at Marcus over something minor and had to apologize. He skipped meals. He worked until exhaustion was the only thing that could quiet his mind. And through it all, Victoria's words kept echoing. You're making an enemy you can't afford. Thursday night, 2 weeks after the lawsuit went public, Cassandra called. Are you free tomorrow? She asked. Yeah, why? I want you to meet someone, Cassandra said. Someone who can help. Help with what? Perspective, Cassandra said. Be at my office at 10. She hung up before Ethan could ask anything else. Friday morning, Ethan arrived at Cassandra's office at exactly 10. She was waiting in the lobby, along with a man Ethan didn't recognize, early 60s, silver hair, sharp suit, eyes that suggested he'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. Ethan Walker, Cassandra said. This is James Harrington. He was my first investor, 20 years ago. James extended his hand. Pleasure. Ethan shook it, confused. Nice to meet you. James went through something similar when we started working together, Cassandra said. Lawsuits, media attacks, competitors trying to sabotage what we were building. I thought it might help to hear how he handled it. They walked to a small conference room. Coffee was already waiting. So, James said, settling into his chair, Cassandra tells me you're drowning. Ethan bristled. I'm managing. That's what drowning people always say, James said, right before they go under. Cassandra gave James a look. Be nice. I am being nice, James said. Nice would be lying to him, I'm being honest. He turned to Ethan. 20 years ago, a competitor sued Cassandra and me for theft of intellectual property. It was garbage. Pure retaliation because we'd outbid them for a client. But it made headlines. Investors got nervous. Clients started asking questions. Revenue dropped 30% in 2 months. What did you do? Ethan asked. I panicked, James said simply. I tried to control everything. The narrative, the clients, the team. I micromanaged. I made bad decisions out of fear. and I almost destroyed what we'd built. So what changed? Cassandra fired me. Ethan blinked. What? Not permanently, Cassandra said. Just for a week. I told him to go home, clear his head, and remember why we started in the first place. And did you? Ethan asked James. Eventually, James said. But the real lesson wasn't about remembering why. It was about accepting that I couldn't control everything. That some things, lawsuits, media, competitors, were going to happen no matter what I did. And that the only thing I could control was how I responded. So you stopped trying to control it. I stopped trying to control everything, James corrected. I controlled what mattered, the work, the team, the relationships with clients. Everything else, I let go. Ethan sat back in his chair, processing. You're trying to fight a war on every front, Cassandra said gently. And you can't win that way. You'll burn out before Victoria runs out of ammunition. So what do I do? You focus, Cassandra said, on delivering for your clients, on supporting your team, on building what we said we'd build. The lawsuit will resolve itself. The media will move on. But if you let this derail you, if you lose sight of what actually matters, then Victoria wins. Ethan looked at James. And the lawsuit? It just went away? It got dismissed 6 months later, James said, by which point nobody cared anymore. We'd already moved on, built new clients, new revenue streams. The competitor who sued us went bankrupt 2 years later. Karma? Ethan asked. Irrelevance, James said. They spent all their energy fighting us instead of building something worth protecting. Don't make the same mistake. Ethan left the meeting feeling lighter than he had in weeks. Not because the problems had disappeared, they hadn't, but because for the first time, he could see a path forward that didn't involve trying to control everything. That afternoon, he called the team together again. I've been doing this wrong, he said without preamble. Sarah frowned. Doing what wrong? Leading, Ethan said. I've been so focused on protecting what we've built that I forgot we're still building it. I've been reactive instead of proactive, scared instead of confident. We're all scared, Rachel said. I know, Ethan said, but that stops now. The lawsuit's going to play out however it plays out. We can't control that. What we can control is the work. So that's what we're going to focus on. Marcus leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying we double down, Ethan said. We stop worrying about what Victoria's doing and start focusing on what we're doing. We land new clients. We deliver exceptional work. We prove that we're not a flash in the pan. We're the real thing. That's ambitious, Dev said. It's necessary, Ethan said. Because if we don't, Victoria wins. And I'm not giving her that satisfaction. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus grinned. All right, he said. Let's do it. And for the first time in 2 weeks, Ethan felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The shift didn't happen overnight. It happened in small increments, in decisions made and doubts pushed aside, in the deliberate choice to focus on what they could control instead of what they couldn't. Marcus landed a new client the following week, a regional healthcare network that needed help streamlining their administrative operations. It wasn't the biggest deal they'd ever closed, but it was solid. Reliable revenue with potential for expansion. Rachel salvaged the manufacturing project that had nearly fallen apart months ago. The CEO called personally to say they wanted to extend the contract into a second phase. More work, more trust, more proof that what they were building actually worked. Sarah hired 2 more people, an operations coordinator and a senior analyst, both of whom came from competitors who'd been watching Walker Consulting's growth with interest. They weren't running toward the drama. They were running toward the opportunity. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. 3 weeks after Ethan's conversation with James Harrington, the first cracks appeared in Victoria's lawsuit. A judge dismissed 2 of her claims outright, calling them speculative and unsupported by evidence. The remaining claims were technically still active, but Cassandra's lawyers projected dismissal within 60 days. The media coverage changed too. What had been breathless reporting about scandal and betrayal became dry legal analysis. Reporters moved on to newer scandals, juicier stories. By the end of the month, Victoria's lawsuit had been relegated to the business section's back pages, but Victoria herself wasn't finished. On a Thursday afternoon in early November, Ethan received a certified letter at the office. He signed for it, frowning at the return address, a law firm he didn't recognize. He opened it in his office, Marcus leaning against the doorframe. "What is it?" Marcus asked. Ethan scanned the letter, his stomach sinking with each paragraph. "Victoria's suing me personally, for defamation." "What?" "She's claiming I made false statements about her to the press." Ethan looked up. "Which is insane. I haven't talked to a single reporter." "Let me see that." Marcus read the letter, his expression darkening. "This is retaliation. She knows the lawsuit against Cassandra is falling apart, so she's coming after you instead. Can she do that?" "She can file anything she wants," Marcus said. "Doesn't mean it'll stick." Ethan's phone rang. Cassandra. "You got the letter," she said without preamble. "How did you know?" "Because I got served with a copy this morning," Cassandra said. "Her lawyers are required to notify me since you're my portfolio company." "Ethan, I'm sorry. This is exactly what I was afraid of." "What do I do?" "Nothing," Cassandra said. "My legal team will handle it. They're already drafting a motion to dismiss. This is harassment, pure and simple. No judge is going to let it proceed." "And if they do?" "They won't," Cassandra said firmly. "But if they did, we'd fight it. Together. You're not alone in this." Ethan hung up and sat in silence, the letter still in his hand. Marcus pulled up a chair. "You okay?" "No," Ethan said honestly. "I'm tired. I'm tired of this hanging over us. Tired of waiting for the next attack. Tired of Victoria treating me like a chess piece in some game I never asked to play." "So let's end it," Marcus said. "How?" "We talked to her," Marcus said. "Not through lawyers, not through the press. Directly. You and her. Clear the air." "That's a terrible idea." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But what's she going to do? Sue you again? She's already doing that." Ethan considered it. Every rational part of his brain said no. This was what lawyers were for. This was what Cassandra's resources were meant to handle. But another part of him, the stubborn part that had kept him in that ballroom when everyone wanted him to leave, wanted to face Victoria directly, to stop being reactive and start being proactive. "I'll think about it," Ethan said. Marcus stood. "Don't think too long. The longer this drags out, the more damage it does." That evening, Ethan did something he hadn't done in months. He called Rebecca Chen. "Ethan Walker," she said, picking up on the second ring. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need advice." "Always happy to dispense wisdom. What's the situation?" He told her everything. The lawsuit against Cassandra, the media circus, Victoria's new lawsuit targeting him personally, the exhaustion of fighting a battle he hadn't started. Rebecca listened without interrupting, the way she always did. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You want my honest opinion?" she asked finally. "Always." "You're letting her live in your head rent-free," Rebecca said. "Victoria Langford is a bitter woman who peaked 20 years ago and has spent every day since trying to recapture something that's gone. She's not your enemy, Ethan. She's a cautionary tale." "That doesn't make the lawsuit go away." "No, but it changes how you see it," Rebecca said. "Right now, you're treating this like an existential threat. Like if you don't handle it perfectly, everything collapses. But that's not true. Your company's growing. Your clients are happy. Your team believes in you. Victoria can throw all the lawsuits she wants. It doesn't change any of that." "So what do I do?" "You let it go," Rebecca said simply. "Not literally. You let the lawyers handle the legal stuff. But emotionally, you stop giving her power over you. You stop checking the news every morning to see what she's said. You stop lying awake wondering what she'll do next. You focus on your work, and you let her fade into irrelevance." Ethan closed his eyes. "That's easier said than done." "Most worthwhile things are," Rebecca said. "But you've already done the hard part, Ethan. You built something real. Don't let someone else's bitterness poison it." They talked for another hour, about everything and nothing. By the time they hung up, Ethan felt steadier. He didn't take Marcus's advice about confronting Victoria, but he did take Rebecca's advice about letting go. He stopped reading articles about the lawsuit. He stopped checking his phone compulsively for updates. He deleted Victoria's number from his contacts so he wouldn't be tempted to respond if she reached out again. And he focused on the work. December brought the kind of momentum that felt almost surreal. The manufacturing client expanded their contract again. Marcus closed 3 new deals in 2 weeks. Rachel was promoted to Director of Client Services, a title they'd created specifically for her because she'd earned it. The team grew to 15 people. The office that had felt cavernous 6 months ago now felt cramped again. Sarah started looking for a bigger space. And on a cold Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before Christmas, Cassandra called with news. "The lawsuit's been dismissed," she said. "All of it. Both the case against me and the one against you. The judge ruled that Victoria failed to establish any legitimate basis for her claims and sanctioned her lawyers for filing frivolous litigation." Ethan sat down, the relief so sudden and complete it left him dizzy. "It's over?" "It's over," Cassandra confirmed. "Victoria can't refile, can't appeal, it's done." "What happens now?" "Now we celebrate," Cassandra said, "and then we get back to work." That evening, Ethan took the team out for drinks. Not at the dive bar they usually went to, but at a nicer place downtown with a view of the city lights. He gave a toast that was probably too long and definitely too sentimental, but nobody seemed to mind. Marcus pulled him aside later in the evening, both of them standing by the windows watching the city stretch out below them. "We did it," Marcus said. "We survived it," Ethan corrected. "Same thing." "Is it?" Marcus looked at him. "Yeah, it is. Because surviving something like this, that's how you know what you're made of. A year ago, if someone had told you you'd face lawsuits and media attacks and clients walking away, you'd have said it would destroy you. But it didn't. You're still standing." Ethan took a sip of his drink. "We're still standing." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "We are." Christmas came and went. Ethan spent it with Marcus's family. His own parents had retired to Florida years ago, and the distance made holiday visits complicated. It was loud and chaotic, and exactly what he needed after months of stress. New Year's arrived with a different kind of pressure. The second quarter review was scheduled for January 15th, and this time the stakes felt higher. They'd weathered the storm, but they still needed to prove they could deliver on the promises they'd made. The week before the review, Ethan worked with Sarah and Dev to compile everything they'd accomplished. The numbers were strong. Revenue up 42% year over year, client retention at 93%, team satisfaction scores higher than they'd ever been. On paper, they were crushing it. But Ethan had learned enough about business to know that numbers only told part of the story. The morning of the review, he arrived at Cassandra's office at 9:30, giving himself time to settle before the 10 o'clock start. Marcus was with him again, both of them carrying laptops loaded with presentations. Cassandra greeted them in the lobby, Laura and Michael flanking her as usual. "Gentlemen," Cassandra said, "ready?" "As we'll ever be," Ethan said. They settled into the conference room, and Ethan pulled up the first slide. For the next 90 minutes, he walked them through everything. The wins, the challenges, the pivots they'd made when clients pushed back, the investments they'd made in infrastructure and people, the pipeline for the next quarter. Laura asked sharp questions about burn rate and cash flow. Michael wanted clarification on some of the contract terms they'd negotiated. Cassandra mostly listened, occasionally jotting notes, but saying little. When Ethan finished, the room was quiet. Then Cassandra smiled. "You exceeded every projection we set," she said. "Revenue, client acquisition, team growth, all of it. You didn't just survive a difficult quarter, you thrived through it." "We had help," Ethan said, nodding toward her. "You had resources," Cassandra corrected. "What you did with them was entirely your choice, and you chose well." Laura leaned forward. "The question now is what comes next. You've built a strong foundation, but if you want to scale beyond regional presence, you'll need to make some strategic decisions about expansion." "What kind of expansion?" Marcus asked. "Geographic, for one," Laura said. "Right now you're concentrated in a single metro area. There's opportunity in other markets, Chicago, Boston, Seattle, but that requires infrastructure you don't have yet." "We've been thinking about that," Ethan said, "but we wanted to make sure we had the local market locked down first." Smart," Cassandra said. "Premature expansion kills more companies than stagnation. But there's a window here. You're gaining visibility. The lawsuit, ironically, put you on people's radar. If you move strategically in the next 6 months, you could establish yourself as a national player instead of a regional one." Ethan exchanged a glance with Marcus. They talked about expansion in abstract terms, late-night what-if conversations over bad coffee. But hearing Cassandra say it made it real. We'd need more capital, Ethan said. You would, Cassandra agreed. Which is why I'm prepared to offer a second round of investment. Another $10 million, same equity structure as before. But this time, we'd be funding strategic expansion rather than operational growth. Marcus's eyes widened. Another $10 million? If you want it, Cassandra said, you don't have to decide today. Take time to think about whether that's the direction you want to go. But the offer's on the table. Ethan's mind was racing. $20 million total, national expansion. A company that could compete with the big consulting firms instead of just carving out a niche. It was everything he'd never let himself want. I'll need to talk to the team, Ethan said. Of course, Cassandra said. Let's reconvene in 2 weeks. That'll give you time to think it through. They wrapped up the meeting, shook hands, exchanged pleasantries. But as Ethan and Marcus walked to the elevator, neither of them said anything. It wasn't until they were in the car pulling out of the garage that Marcus broke the silence. Holy shit, he said. Yeah, Ethan agreed. She wants to give us another $10 million. I know. To go national. I know. Marcus turned to look at him. So why don't you look excited? Ethan kept his eyes on the road. Because I'm terrified. Of what? Of screwing it up, Ethan said. We barely survived the last 6 months. We lost clients, dealt with lawsuits, almost burned out half the team, and that was with $10 million in one market. What happens when we're trying to manage 3 or 4 markets? When we're hiring people in cities we don't know, taking on clients we can't visit in person? We figure it out, Marcus said, like we always do. Or we overextend and collapse, Ethan said. There's a reason most companies fail during expansion. It's not because they're not good enough. It's because growth is hard, and scaling is even harder. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Do you trust Cassandra? Yeah, I do. Do you trust the team? Of course. Do you trust yourself? Ethan didn't answer right away, because that was the real question, wasn't it? Not whether he could do it, but whether he believed he could. I'm working on it, he said finally. Then let's work on it together, Marcus said. We've got 2 weeks. Let's run the numbers, talk to the team, figure out if this makes sense. And if it does, we do it. If it doesn't, we tell Cassandra thanks, but no thanks. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Marcus said. The execution's complicated, but the decision is simple. Do we want to build something bigger than what we have now, or are we content staying where we are? Ethan thought about that as he drove. About the 3-person team in a closet that had become 15 people in an actual office. About the clients they'd helped, the problems they'd solved, the lives they'd changed. And he thought about what Rebecca had said months ago. What do you actually want? He wanted to build something that mattered, something that lasted, something that proved, to himself more than anyone, that he was capable of more than just surviving. Let's talk to the team, Ethan said. They called an all-hands meeting the next morning. Ethan had learned over the past months that transparency was better than secrecy, that people could handle difficult news if you trusted them with it. He told them about Cassandra's offer, about the opportunity to expand nationally, about what it would mean, more hiring, more complexity, more risk. I'm not making this decision alone, Ethan said. This affects all of you, your workload, your roles, your equity stakes, so I want your input. Tell me what you think. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Rachel spoke up. I think we'd be crazy not to do it. Why? Ethan asked. Because we're good at this, Rachel said simply. I've worked at big firms, fancy firms, firms with recognizable names and huge budgets. And you know what? We're better. We're more responsive, more creative, more invested in our clients' success. The only thing holding us back is scale. If we can solve that, we can compete with anyone. Sarah nodded. I agree, but we need to be smart about it. We can't just throw money at the problem. We need real infrastructure, real systems, real processes. Otherwise, we'll drown in complexity. That's fair, Ethan said. What else? Dev raised his hand tentatively. What happens to us? The people who've been here from the beginning. Do we get left behind when you hire all these new people in other cities? It was a legitimate question, and Ethan was glad Dev had asked it. No, Ethan said firmly. The people in this room are the foundation of this company. You're not getting left behind. You're getting promoted. We'll need regional managers, team leads, senior advisors. The new people we hire will be building on what you've already built. So we're going to do this, Marcus said. It wasn't quite a question. Ethan looked around the room. At Rachel, who'd taken a risk leaving her prestigious firm to join them. At Sarah, who'd turned chaos into order more times than he could count. At Dev, Kevin, Priya, and all the others who'd believed in something when it was still fragile. I think we are, Ethan said. The team erupted in excited conversation. Marcus was grinning, Sarah was already pulling up spreadsheets, and Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. 2 weeks later, Ethan sat across from Cassandra in the same conference room where this had all started. We're in, he said. Cassandra smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. But we have conditions, Ethan added. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Ethan pulled out a document he and Marcus had spent the past week drafting. We want to maintain operational control during the expansion. You get regular updates, quarterly reviews, final say on major strategic decisions, but day-to-day execution stays with us. Agreed, Cassandra said. We want to phase the expansion. One new market every 6 months, not all at once. That gives us time to build infrastructure and learn from mistakes. Also agreed. And we want to reserve equity for future hires. We're going to need talented people to make this work, and we want to be able to offer them ownership, not just salaries. Cassandra considered that. How much equity are we talking about? 5%, Ethan said. Carved out of my personal stake, not the overall company. Cassandra looked at Laura, who nodded. That's reasonable. Then we have a deal, Cassandra said, extending her hand. Ethan shook it, and for the second time felt the weight of a decision that would change everything. The contracts were signed 3 days later. The second $10 million hit their account the following week, and with it came a realization that both excited and terrified Ethan. There was no going back now. March brought the launch of their first expansion market. They'd chosen Chicago, close enough to manage directly, different enough to test their systems. Marcus flew out to set up the office, hiring a local team of 3 to start. It was messy. There were mistakes, wrong hires, miscommunications, clients who didn't understand their model. But there were also wins. By the end of the first month, the Chicago office had landed 2 clients. By the end of the second, they'd hired 2 more people. It was working. In April, Ethan got an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line was simple. Congratulations. He almost deleted it, but curiosity won. Mr. Walker, I wanted to reach out personally to acknowledge your success. What you've built is impressive, and I was wrong to underestimate you. I spent months trying to tear down what Cassandra Vale built, and in the process, I forgot to build anything of my own. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I'm offering an apology. What I did was petty and cruel, and you didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of it. I hope you continue to succeed. Victoria Langford. Ethan read it twice, trying to find the angle, the hidden barb, the trap. But there wasn't one. It was just an apology. Imperfect, too late, but real. He didn't respond, but he didn't delete it either. Some things didn't need a response. They just needed to be acknowledged and let go. By summer, Walker Consulting had offices in 3 cities, a team of 32 people, and revenue projections that made Ethan's head spin. They'd become the thing he'd never let himself imagine, a real company, a national presence, a success story. In August, Ethan got a call from an industry publication asking if he'd be interested in speaking at their annual conference. The topic, building a company through crisis. He almost said no, but then he thought about the young entrepreneurs who'd been where he was a year ago, terrified, uncertain, wondering if they had what it took. He said yes. The conference was in Boston, the first time Ethan had spoken publicly about anything beyond client presentations. He stood backstage, heart pounding, wondering what the hell he'd agreed to. Marcus appeared beside him. You ready? No? Good. That means you care. Ethan walked onto the stage, 2,000 people staring up at him, waiting. He took a breath, and he told them the truth. About the ballroom where he'd been humiliated. About the test he hadn't known he was taking. About Victoria's lawsuit and the media circus, and the moments when he'd been sure everything would collapse. About choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. About trusting people when trust felt impossible. About building something that mattered even when the odds were stacked against him. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't make himself sound heroic. He just told the story, messy, imperfect, human. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people approached him. Young founders, experienced executives, people who'd been through their own battles and found something resonant in his story. One woman, maybe 25, caught him as he was leaving. "Thank you," she said. "I've been thinking about shutting down my company, but your story reminded me why I started in the first place." "What are you building?" Ethan asked. "Education software for low-income schools," she said. "It's not profitable yet. Probably won't be for years, but it matters." "Then don't quit," Ethan said. "Not because it's easy to keep going, but because you'll regret it if you don't." She nodded, eyes bright. "I won't." Ethan watched her walk away, and something settled in his chest. This was why he'd done it. Not for the money, not for the recognition, but for moments like this where something he'd survived could help someone else endure. That night, he had dinner with Cassandra. She'd been at the conference, sitting in the back row, listening. "You did well up there," she said. "I was terrified." "Everyone's terrified," Cassandra said. "The difference is whether you let it stop you." "Is that why you invested in me? Because I didn't let it stop me?" Cassandra considered that. "Partly. But mostly because you were real. You didn't perform, you didn't pretend, you were just yourself, even when that self was uncomfortable and uncertain and scared." "And that's valuable?" "That's everything," Cassandra said, "because anyone can succeed when things are easy. But the people who succeed when things are hard, those are the ones worth betting on." Ethan raised his glass. "To hard things." "To hard things," Cassandra echoed. They drank, and Ethan felt the weight of the past year settle into something like peace. He'd survived. More than survived. He'd built something real, and he was just getting started. The fall brought new challenges, new opportunities, new mistakes to learn from. But Ethan faced them differently now, not with certainty. He still doubted himself most days, but with the knowledge that doubt didn't have to be disqualifying. In November, a year after the lawsuit had been dismissed, Ethan took a rare Sunday off. He drove to the waterfront, the same route he'd run the day after the first quarterly review, and walked along the pier. The city looked different now. Or maybe he looked at it differently. A year ago, he'd been drowning in uncertainty, wondering if he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Now he was building something that mattered, leading a team that believed in him, proving every day that he was capable of more than he'd ever imagined. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Just closed the Seattle deal. We're officially coast to coast." Ethan smiled and typed back, "Drinks on me tomorrow." He pocketed the phone and stood at the edge of the pier, watching the water. There would be more challenges ahead, more clients, more competitors, more moments when everything felt impossible. But he'd faced impossible before. And he was still standing. Not because he was fearless, not because he had all the answers, but because he'd learned the most important lesson of all. You didn't have to be perfect to succeed. You just had to refuse to quit. And that was something Ethan Walker knew how to do. He turned away from the water and headed home, ready for whatever came next.